play. And another foul on board. His third for setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen.
Pick and roll. And a foul, offensive foul coming up there. Valentine's standing right there.
Izzo dying for a moving screen.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Moving Screen Podcast. I'm Brendan Quinn from The Athletic, here with Dylan Burkhart of Hoops, coming off yesterday's 87-69 win for Michigan State over Michigan in the annual Moving Screen Invitational. Dylan, how are you, pal?
I'm good.
Part one, that's right.
I'm good. A lot to break down. Another historic performance from Cassius Winston in
Beast.
The rivalry game.
That was bad. He's a bad man.
It was impressive. I don't know, not a lot.
Before we get into the sales pitch, what would you describe? So you sat courtside. We were right next to each other on the baseline, under the basket, next to the Michigan bench. What would you describe it's like, or how would you describe Cassius Winston in person on a day like that? Just the way that he kind of plays, the speed that he plays at, things like that.
Yeah, I think the speed is something more just about Michigan State and how you have to prepare to play Michigan State. Even if Cassius Winston wasn't in there, I think they play with that speed. But the way his sense of calm, how he makes everything look so easy, he'll make incredible shots and it just sort of looks routine. I think that really stands out. There's just a confidence to his game that you don't really. It's not like he's making easy plays. He's making tough shot after tough shot and just kind of floats around on the court and makes the plays and just says, yeah, of course I made those plays. That's what stands out to me is just that kind of ease to his game when he's out there.
Yeah, it's funny that – so when I said speed, it's interesting that you thought of the transition, which is true because they do play extremely fast. But he plays, it seems – I feel like when you watch him in person up close like that, it seems like he's so slow almost. And I don't mean that as like a jab. I mean it more as just like he's just so overly in control that it's not that kind of hiccup quick, I'm going to beat you off the bounce, blah, blah, blah. It's just like he just finds cracks and crevices and always his vision is ridiculous. His head is always up. His head's never down. And he just kind of plays at his own tempo and pace and speed.
Think about it like the game. He sees the game to the point where it's slow to him, but it allows him to move faster than everyone else. He's going to the spot where he needs to go before anyone else. He sees the game before everyone else, which allows him to, I guess, seem faster. But I think some of that comes from the advantage that Michigan State creates by getting into offense so quick.
True.
Just flying up the court like that gets you in a situation where you already have your defender on their heels.
Well, I think that it was it is right up there with last year's Duke game, probably as the definitive performances of his college career to date. So we will get into that much more. We're going to talk Michigan State up front. We're going to talk Michigan on the back end, what went wrong, and what should be reason for concern moving forward. Before we get into that, I just want to remind everyone to make sure you subscribe to both The Athletic and Hoops. I have a story up there today on Cassius Winston and the hunt to try to learn some things that we don't know about this guy at this point. Had some fun with that. Dylan, as always, did a terrific job breaking down the game from Michigan's perspective, looking at just the varying issues that emerged and talking about rotational stuff without Isaiah Livers. He did a great job there. So check that out, and I'm sure you'll have much more coming this week.
Yep, definitely. And it's setting up to be a pretty huge week for Michigan now that you're looking at two important but winnable games, I would say.
Yeah, it's a week that could really set things back in order, or it's a week that could set things kind of spiraling. So we'll see how it goes. But let's get into this thing we're going to start with Michigan State. Obviously, with Cassius Winston being as good as he was, it was not only an outstanding performance, but you brought it up, like the way that Michigan State plays. And if you go back and look at so many of his baskets, like it is his talent, but at the same time, like Xavier Tillman is such an outstanding screener. And those guys, it's not only that Xavier knows Cassius knows how he plays, it's that everyone on that team knows how he plays. And everyone just knows how to position their bodies, pick a guy on the hip or do whatever. There was that great example of Thomas Kithier sprinting the length of the floor and interfering with three different guys when Cassius went the length of the floor one-on-one. Looked like it beat Michigan's entire defense, but they just looked as connected as they have been all year. It looked much more like the version of Michigan State that I thought we were going to see early.
So I don't disagree, but you could be positioned properly in the corner if Cassius Winston is just going to dribble into a 17-foot step back and make half of them, right? I mean, it doesn't really matter. Some of the shots he hit, obviously 2 or 3 baskets probably were a product of things like that, right? And that's how Michigan State plays. I don't think there are very few supporting players on Michigan State's roster that didn't play well, even like in their role. But Winston made a lot of really tough shots. I mean, he made half his shots in the paint. He was 5 of 10, but he also hit, I think, 6 of 9 jumpers. Sounds right. And I included quite a few of those tough mid-range shots that we said Michigan was going to try to force Michigan State to take. Well, if you're just making those,
see, I thought that he got those looks, but they weren't. Some of them weren't that tough by his standards. Like I think look at the first possession of the game, right? Teskey sat back on that kind of late ball screen and late in the shot clock, and Cassius happily just took a step in jumper with Simpson pinned to Teskey's hip, to Tillman's hip, and Teskey was 5 feet off of him. The third possession of the game, Johns kind of slid with the ball screen, but scooted back before Simpson had time to recover. And Cassius penetrated in. He missed the layup, but Tillman was there. No one was around him for that tip in.
So, like the opening jumper you're talking about, that's a shot Cassius Winston probably makes, 40% of the time, 45% of the time? So that's almost the best shot you're going to get that you can force him into, right? So if he's making that shot 60, 70% of the time, what are you going to do? Michigan tried just about everything defensively.
True.
Winston had an answer. Michigan hedged, Michigan dropped, Michigan played some weird, funky matchup zone.
I don't know what we have to
man in the middle
talking about that. Yeah.
Possession. And Winston was 11 of 19 from the floor. It's not like he's shooting catch and shoot jump shots. To shoot 11 of 19 from the floor when you're doing all the heavy lifting yourself, that's impressive. He hasn't been that efficient in those situations this year, by and large. So it was a breakthrough return to what he was, I guess, almost you could say, and he did it on the biggest stage, I would say.
He has now in the 4-game winning streak against Michigan, he has made or assisted on 65 of 97 field goals for Michigan State. He has.
That almost seems low.
He has Michigan's number. I think it goes without saying right now. What do you think about this idea that, like, for me, I know this might be a little bit too narrative driven for you, my cognitive friend, but what do you think of this idea that it kind of felt to me like his senior season started yesterday? There's a big shrug for those at home.
I mean, if you want to say it's the best game of his senior season, his Player of the Year campaign started yesterday.
That's true.
It would have started earlier if he had played better in an earlier game, though. Like, he's certainly going to take confidence from this, and I feel like he was already playing pretty well over the last couple games, right?
He was
Like,
getting
is that
better.
fair?
He was getting better.
So I mean, if you want to say that, sure. I don't know that I really buy much into what that even means, but it's a thing that you can say.
It just he played with a level of enjoyment yesterday that was obviously missing for weeks earlier this year, where his head was obviously other places, rightfully so. It just seemed like the guy that we saw in March of last year, and the guy that we saw earlier this year was someone who was kind of almost in the midst of like an out-of-body experience. But yesterday was that's Cassius Winston, man, and it's.
I think is that the best game he's played?
That and then last year's Duke game. Last year's Duke game, he went for 20 points, 10 assists, just had them on a string. He controlled every aspect of that game. So I think those are the two definitive performances of his career thus far at Michigan State. And we're running out of adjectives. They still have a lot of games to play. And if he's going to play like this, first of all, I agree with you that he is right back in the conversation for National Player of the Year, all that crap. But Michigan State's a completely different team when he plays like that. I mean, they were humming. They're now up to the number one ranked offense in KenPom. Coming off of that game, I think they went from 4-1 based on that game. Put 87 on Michigan.
So a couple things. Does Winston have to score 30 for Michigan State's offense to reach this peak? Or is that something that Michigan did? Or is that just the fact that he couldn't miss? Like, what is the ideal Michigan State offense this season Winston as a scorer or Winston as a playmaker?
Both.
A distributor? Both.
100% both. I don't think he needs to score 30 because you're going to still have nights where Aaron Henry gets 15, 18. And, foul trouble took him out a little bit early. But this game was, Xavier Tillman told me after the game that he and Winston talked about it and said, this is a big rivalry game. This is on us. We're the old guys. We have to dominate this game out of the ball screen and just pick these guys apart. And they took it upon themselves, and they did it. What they combined for, 50? Something like that?
52.
52. I don't think that needs to be the case every game. I think this was it's a rivalry game. It's a huge game. It's a kind of a game that can really spark the season. Let's do it ourselves. And they did. But moving forward, no. I mean, I think a perfect game for Cassius Winston's like 22-8. I don't think it needs to be 32-9. Because Gabe Brown's going to hit threes coming down the stretch. Aaron Henry's going to get his offense. Rocket Watts making those threes down the stretch. Like, maybe if that builds confidence, who knows? But I liked what I saw from him. They suddenly have a lot of pieces. Kyle Arns made that a couple nice, or I think both of those were corner jumpers. His two made field goals.
Yeah, and I think they were both like on the line.
Yeah,
right. They're both long twos.
Yeah, and they look like a team with a lot of pieces suddenly. What do you think on that?
I think if you're Michigan, you're disappointed that you allowed Cassius to just beat you. I think the game plan to beat Michigan State is to somehow force Rocket Watts or Kyle Arns to make a play before the game is a 12 or 13-point game. I think the key is to come up with some way to make someone else beat you, and Michigan just couldn't do that. I don't know how you do that necessarily. I don't think it's an easy thing to accomplish, but I do think that's what we've seen. If you look back at the Kentucky game, when teams are really blitzing the pick and roll and just forcing Cassius to just throw the ball to someone else and do something, that I think becomes really all you can do, because you can't just let Winston do his thing because he can score like this. And we've always talked about how his efficiency numbers, shooting, scoring, were always crazy, and he didn't use enough possessions like that. Remember we said that 2 years ago? How he was a guy who was too efficient to not take more shots. Well, if you're going to let him take 19, 20 shots, he's going to kill you. So you have to do something, I think, to force Michigan State into some other look, and Michigan obviously failed at that.
What stuck out to you the most about Michigan State's defense on not only on Michigan but on Xavier specifically?
Yeah, so I think it boils down to, I think Michigan State had the perfect game plan. They knew that they could play off of Brandon Johns in ball screens, and Johns took a three, I think, in the first couple possessions, missed it pretty badly. I think if you were to just watch him catch the ball for the rest of the first half, he probably pump faked, one dribble, passed about 4 or 5 shots. Those would all be 3-point attempts if Isaiah Livers was in the game.
Yep.
Michigan State knew that, and the best stat I have that explains that is Michigan had 19 possessions where Simpson passed the ball out of a ball screen or an isolation set, and they scored 12 points. So that's 0.63 points per Simpson pass out. Entering this game, they were up around like 1.2 points per possession on Simpson pass outs. So that tells you Michigan's other players couldn't make a shot in those situations, but it also tells you that Michigan State was able to really take those away because they were helping so significantly off, right? Yep. You don't have Isaiah Livers to make those shots. It's not going to be the same efficiency.
And they were able to sag. They were not only smart enough to sag off of Brandon, but they were also sending help on Teskey and trying to stop him from.
Yeah, that's because when you sag off of, right, you can take away the role when you can help off of the shooters.
When you have a free man, you can do those things.
They did that extremely well. I mean, even if you do it, even if you know you can do that, you have to execute that plan. And Michigan State's defense was really good. I thought they really utilized the length advantage in the backcourt. Eli Brooks never looked comfortable because he had a taller guy on him most of the game. And then they blocked, 12 shots? I think Michigan State had 12 blocks, and Michigan made, 22s? So blocked a lot of Michigan's interior attempts.
Their bigs did a great job of walling up, I thought, all day. Not being overly aggressive, but for Michigan fans, you always hear about Beeline talk about walling up, and you saw it, I think, it was pretty much perfect from Michigan State's point of view, the way that they were doing that.
Yeah, Michigan was 17 of 39 in the paint. So Michigan tried to go inside, and Michigan State held them to 44% shooting in there. You're going to win games when you do exactly that.
And the luxury of being able to put multiple guys on Xavier Simpson is something that not a lot of other teams have, and it's because Michigan's backcourt is so small that you can kind of, even though Cassius Winston's defense has improved, he's still a guy that, you don't need him chasing around Xavier Simpson all game when you need to rely on him for offense. So the ability to put, I thought, Aaron Henry and Rocket Watts on Xavier Simpson, let them worry about it, and just let Cassius Winston kind of play defense and focus on offense was a huge factor for both sides of the court.
Yeah, it's a lot to ask for a point guard to go 40 minutes, carry the whole offense, and be the most important player on defense.
Kind of like Xavier Simpson.
Yeah, and Winston, it's not that he's resting on defense, but he's not in the most important pressure situation on every single possession.
Right.
And it's not just that you have someone else there. You have Aaron Henry, who's probably the best defender on the team,
right,
best athlete, and actually creates a mismatch with his size and length and everything else.
Yeah, I was really impressed by Michigan State's game plan all the way around.
Yeah, I don't know what. If you look at this game, it's not like something random happened. Michigan State just had the better plan and the better pieces. I'm not really sure what Michigan, when built like this, could do differently to beat Michigan State in this situation, right? I think it says something about a team to be able to say, all right, this is the flaw of this team we're playing, and we're going to build a game plan that exploits it perfectly, and that's exactly what Michigan State did.
Yes, yeah. And for for Michigan, like, for everything that went wrong, and for,
Hold on, can we talk a little more Michigan State for?
Yeah, of course.
All right, so I want to talk big picture for a second about Michigan State. A lot of noise and whatever else in early December. Through 4 Big Ten games, Michigan State's outscoring teams by 19 points per 100 possessions, 4-0, and like a runaway favorite for the Big Ten right now. You agree with that?
I do, and they are playing faster.
True. I mean, faster than they have in previous years?
Yeah, like usually I feel like it's the opposite way, where they get the Big Ten play and they start slowing down. It seems to me like they're speeding up.
Yep, that's fair. So, also, Michigan State's defense, second in the Big Ten. That's something that was kind of like, I considered it a weakness, mostly because I just look at Ken Pom a lot, and they were down around 25th. But if you really like dive in and look at it, I think this Michigan State defense is still pretty damn good. I don't really know. Obviously, the Duke game was a bad defensive performance. Virginia Tech hit some threes, but this defense is, all the vital signs are there, right? They're 7th in effective field goal percentage. They're a good defensive rebounding team. I don't really know why. I don't know why they're still ranked 25th. I think this looks like a top 10 defense, and it's going to continue trending that way in the Big Ten, where they're one of the best defensive teams in the league already.
I mean, their effective field goal percentage defensively in Big Ten games, 40.6%. That's tops in the league. I agree with you. And it goes back to kind of some of our preseason thinking, where you're like, all right, you have to think that any defense that's anchored by Xavier Tillman and Aaron Henry is going to be pretty damn good. You couple that with Gabe Brown's length. I think Rocket Watt's ability to not only guard on the ball defensively, but also cheat and slide and stunt and do all these other things that his athleticism and quickness allows him to do. You get Marcus Bingham's length. You get Thomas Kithier's kind of he seems to have some innate abilities defensively. They should be a good defensive team.
I think they just are a good defensive team.
Yeah.
Duke is Duke, and that happens. But other than that, they've been really good on defense. Also, as far as the Big Ten race, who's number 2 in the Big Ten right now? Second in efficiency margin stats is Wisconsin. So who are you really looking at as a threat to Michigan State at the top of the league? I'm not really sure right now. So they're in a great spot. I do think it's notable that their schedule starts off so easy. 5 of their first 7 games are at home. So there will be some point in the second half of the conference season where maybe they lose a couple games. They wouldn't, but they're going to get off to a roaring start here just based on the schedule, based on the fact that they handled Michigan. So I think you're going to see the national narrative on Michigan State flip completely on its head by the end of January, and they're going to be a top 3 or 4 team in the country by the time February rolls around.
Yeah, upcoming games: home against Minnesota, at Purdue, home against Wisconsin, at Indiana, and then at Minnesota, and then home against Northwestern. They will be favored by at least 6 or 7 in every one of those games, I think.
Could Cassius Winston outscore Purdue?
Man, why you got to kick a guy when they're down? That was awful. Would they finish with 37 last night?
37 points.
My Lord.
18 in the second half, 19 in the first half.
Yeah, I totally agree with you that you're going to see them rocket back up the rankings and all that stuff, but more just kind of people saying, oh, I can't believe we forgot about Michigan State. And, I don't know. On this podcast, we'll kind of be shaking our heads, I think, but this is who we thought they were.
Anything that Michigan State didn't do or anything that to nitpick with that performance? I think there's much.
That's pretty tough, man. I'm trying to go back through it. I mean, 13 turnovers is maybe a touch high.
Yeah, the turnovers kept Michigan in the game.
Yeah.
Especially some of those cheap ones or rips the rebound away.
I think that they'd be pissed that Michigan got 14 offensive rebounds. They'll be pissed by some of those tip-aways that Simpson got. They'd be pissed that Austin Davis randomly came in and got 3 first-half field goals. Like, Michigan is lucky it did not get completely run out of the gym in that first half. If not for those 3 tip-aways and Austin Davis adding 3 field goals, that could have been a 18-point game at halftime.
Yeah, it felt like it could have been an 18-point game at really any point throughout the.
Mm-hmm.
It was weird. Like, the game was right around 10 points all throughout, but it did feel like inevitable that it would spiral into a 20-point game, even though that didn't really happen until the final 90 seconds.
Right. Which kind of brings us to Michigan, and for everything that went wrong, it was a 9-point game with 8 minutes left, something like that.
Yeah, after the game was over, and then Izzo randomly got a technical, and the game was not over. That was very weird.
Yeah,
because we were sitting on the other end of that, so I didn't even see that happen.
I still don't really know what he did.
I think he used the choice word to complain about a call.
I thought he was just outside the coach's box.
He said after that it was the way he complained, not that he was outside the coach's box. He made that clear in his post game.
Okay.
So I think it was what he said, not where he was.
Gotcha.
Whereas Juwan Howard's technical was
he
was more than what he said.
He earned that one. Can we talk about that for a second?
Let's get into it.
Have you ever seen a coach go that far onto the floor? He almost ran into the guy inbounded the ball. That was impressive.
Yeah, I do think that technical fouls in those situations can be strategic as far as when there's a fast break the other way. I think they need to do a better job of not calling them or waiting to call them. So it's kind of a good cheat code to go all the way on the court and make them have to call it. But right, because you basically take away a transition opportunity. You agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, Cassius hit a 3 on the other side.
Exactly.
It bit him in the ass. But at the same time, it's hard not to stop playing call the tech. The guy's on the court.
That's what I'm saying. It was a smart move to go all the way on the court to make him call it. If you just yell at him, you're not going to get the tech. If you really want to get a tech,
just run out into the half court. I mean, he was at the elbow.
Yeah.
So that was. I think we talked about it when we were sitting there. My theory on it is Michigan knows how Tom Izzo operates. They know that he works referees from the opening tip onward, and usually it goes in his favor. He berates guys. He tries to kind of bully his way into making sure that Michigan State's agenda is accounted for, basically. Michigan was aware of that, without a doubt. And Juwan Howard, I think, actively was, we are not going to let one sideline dictate the game and not the other. And he was on those guys from the opening minutes way more than any game that we have seen by far.
We don't sit that close at Chrysler, but he was definitely as aggressive, just kind of working the officials as I've seen by a pretty significant margin. And
yes,
I agree with that. And he did not really win, I would say. Michigan played inside a lot, but did not get to the free throw line nearly as often as Michigan State did, which played a factor, I'd say, in the game. We talked before about.
Did you think the officiating was bad?
I didn't think it was necessary. Where we sat, I'm lucky to see the game, let alone try to evaluate the officiating. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you anything about this call was good, that call was bad.
Yeah.
I think that it is a situation where I don't really know how much you can actually put into working the refs. The amount that actually has an impact, I think, is probably overrated.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also Beeline got how many technicals, and at least one of them was at the Breslin. So it comes with the territory, I think. And yeah, I don't know. He'll probably have to evaluate his approach a bit, and maybe he's going to get technical like that all the time.
Maybe. I mean, it definitely burned his ass, some of the fouls on Teskey, which the first one was not great. It was not a great call. So that was Kithier basically had the arm bar on him, and Teskey got hit with the foul. And he's just a guy, especially without livers. The last thing that they could afford was foul trouble for Teskey.
So that was Teskey's first foul. He also had 2 fouls away from the basket and 2 moving screen fouls.
Very on
So
brand.
Teskey played 25 minutes. Tillman played 36 minutes. That is not great for Michigan as far as you needed Teskey to play more minutes than Tillman to have any chance in that game.
I agree.
You want to get into Michigan a little?
Yeah, I do. I want your thoughts on the kind of rotation at the 4, the effect that it had on the game, and where you think this thing goes if Livers is out for extended time beyond this.
Yeah, the Livers injury, I think you watched how Michigan played against Presbyterian and UMass Lowell without Livers, and they basically tried to play the same way against Michigan State, which I think is probably a little short-sighted. Easy to say that in hindsight, but it really has taken away what made this Michigan team so good earlier in the year, trying to play with multiple bigs on the floor, not a lot of spacing, trying to play through the post. Michigan maybe did that a little bit early in the year as far as a few post touches for Teskey, but I just don't know how you're going to win on the road at Michigan State just trying to post the ball up without multiple shooters on the court. And that's what they tried to do early on. It worked pretty well. Teskey scored a few buckets. Austin Davis even scored a few buckets. But I just don't know that it's necessarily sustainable, especially on the road against a team that defends the interior really, really well. So that's where I come down first. I mean, they were playing John Teskey and Austin Davis at the same time in the second half. I just don't think that is a optimal long-term strategy for this roster.
No. And I don't know what the answer is.
So there's 2 problems. One is Franz Wagner gets whistled for a foul every so often,
right.
quite a bit. But the second is that even if you say the best option is to play Franz at the 4, then you only have 3 guys that can play the 1, 2, and 3 total. So you're low on, and you're going to be really small. Michigan State's really big in those wing spots. So I think that you'd rather play a Simpson, Brooks, DeJulius, Wagner, Teskey lineup. But
you can't play that for 40 minutes.
Yeah, but I think you could play more than you played.
I agree. I don't know how good of a match. I think you're basically fucked either way with Michigan State. That lineup just does not work in that game. I think you can get away with that in a lot of Big Ten games. At Michigan State is not one of them. So it's almost like in terms of what you do with this rotation, you can kind of wipe the slate clean in terms of yesterday, because I think your optimal lineup is impossible in that scenario. Do you agree with that?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know who Franz Wagner could guard in that game, but I think there's a better chance that Malik Hall would lose him for 3 threes at some point in the game than Aaron Henry or Gabe Brown, right? So I just think Michigan trying to play big to quote unquote deal with what Michigan State has just prevented it from exploiting any mismatches in the game.
Yeah, but at the same time, when you go that small against Michigan State, you just give them limitless options matchup-wise that they can just pick and choose as they please. You get to put Henry on Simpson. You get to put Gabe on who's ever shooting it, add length. You know what I mean?
So what do you gain by playing big?
I have no idea. I think that you're this kind of goes to my point. In terms of what Michigan's working with right now, they just don't match up with Michigan State. I'm not sure how. Now maybe at home if you're making shots, I mean they did go 5 for 23. Put it this way, the lineup that you're going to roll out there that we're talking about right now, it sure as hell isn't going to do anything if Eli Brooks is just going to go 1 for 5. Like that's impossible. So
yeah, and
you need more out of him. You need more out of Wagner. And Teskey can't get in foul trouble.
It's hard to say, to play these other guys when they did not play particularly well, right? Like, it's not like DeJulius came in and changed the game, or Eli played well, or Franz played particularly well. And even Brandon had some good moments, but Michigan's offense was just not the same thing when he's at that spot.
It was really weird. Let's talk about Johns.
Okay.
He made that first jumper. He made the first jumper of the game. The second possession. I'm trying to remember exactly what happened.
He missed an early 3, I know.
That was after he made a jumper.
Like a short jumper. Right?
Yeah. It was kind of a catch, pivot, turn around, like 15-foot or something like that. Then he badly missed a 3, and then he hesitated pretty much every other touch.
For the rest of the half.
The more he hesitated, the more Michigan State sagged. The more Michigan State sagged, the more Michigan's spacing was terrible, and it all kind of, just problems compounded. So he did have some flashes of moments that have good things that were probably steps forward, but man, he does create a lot of breakdowns defensively and offensively. Just kind of his hesitation in shooting the ball is tough to deal with. But he's kind of a horse you have to ride right now without Livers. Like, yes, you can occasionally play Wagner at the 4, but like Castleton's giving you nothing. I don't know how sustainable Austin Davis is in a 2 big lineup. Colin Castleton is clearly struggling right now. You don't have many other choices. You got to kind of let him play through it.
Right now you're looking at, there are 7 healthy players that Juwan Howard trusts to put on the court right now. Right. And Austin Davis is one of them, which you wouldn't have imagined saying a month ago.
Right.
Johns, so here's one thing I would say. When Livers comes back, I think Johns has progressed to the point where you could have a really dangerous small ball 5 lineup with him out there.
For sure.
He showed some of that in the Oregon game, but he's really come into his own as far as doing a little bit off the dribble, handling it, scoring, doing things that he could really exploit as a small ball 5.
Mm-hmm.
And it might not look great at the 4, but it could really work there. So I think that is one thing that Michigan has probably found that we'll have a chance to go back to in whenever Isaiah Livers comes back. So keep an eye on that. But Johns is a 30-minute a game 4-man. That's tough. I think he's probably playing some of his best basketball and showing some things, but there's just still too many empty plays, right? Like too many plays where he just makes a bad pass or a lazy pass that turns into a turnover.
Mm-hmm.
Transition breakdowns. I think it's not a surprise that Michigan's transition defense struggled quite a bit, and he's struggled in those spots at other times in his career, just matching up, stuff like that.
Yeah, and
so,
like your margin for error in a game like this is so ridiculously small, especially when you don't have a key guy. And there were a lot of plays that, like the film session, I feel like a lot of people are talking about like, man, Brandon Johns, had a nice game in his hometown and blah, blah, blah. Like my estimation, today's film session is not going to be pleasant.
Yeah, I mean,
and there was like simple things like that little, remember like that little one post entry to Teskey where he just threw it like 3 feet too far to the right and went out of bounds. Like that just can't happen in this game,
Yeah, and I think Juwan was asked about Brandon almost in a positive light, and he said Brandon probably feels really bad. So I think that was kind of telling. I think that someone was trying to get a question about Brandon scoring 12 points coming back home, and I don't think Juwan looked at it as a great performance from Brandon overall.
Yeah.
Where I go, I think with Michigan, the first place you have to start is, and probably the most disappointing element of Michigan's performance was that they did not play any transition defense.
Oh.
And you can't even say, oh, Cassius just beat us, because you didn't do the little things that you have to do to be able to win this game. Even last year when Michigan kind of fell apart late in those games, Michigan played really good transition defense. It's like you have to set the foundation. There's just certain things you have to do against Michigan State or you have no chance to win. And if you're going to give up 21 transition points, you're not going to win at the Breslin Center ever. That number needs to be less than 5. And everything else doesn't matter if you don't do that. So I think that's where you say that's a real problem with Michigan's transition defense, preparation, whatever you want to say. And that's where I would look first.
They did a poor job of identifying the ball. They did a poor job of matching up on guys in transition. Cassius Winston, I asked him after the game, I go, did it feel like you were looking at the back of jerseys all game? And he said yes. And that can never be the answer. I mean, I remember going through prep or sitting through, I guess so the game that was in Ann Arbor last year was on a Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was on a Saturday. And I sat in on the Thursday practice and watched them for 40 minutes just working on transition defense. And the main principle was turning your body, identifying guys on the break, making sure you're matching up. You're not just picking up a man. You have to pick up a man with purpose. Make sure you know your assignments. Like, it is – I feel like there's a lot more goes into it than – people might pick up on watching on television. It's not just running back, right? Like, you need to have spatial awareness. You need to know where the ball is. Communication's crucial. And I think that they just broke down over and over and over again. It started early. Michigan State got Michigan on its heels, and it all just kind of spiraled from there.
Yeah, in that game in Ann Arbor, Michigan State had 4 fast break points.
There you go.
So that's the kind of game you need to, and Michigan had a chance to win that game, just fell apart late. So that's what you need. And if you're giving up 21, it really just speaks to, I mean, it's not a secret. Everyone knows they had to play better transition defense, and it's going to come to a point where how do you get to that level of discipline, preparation, et cetera, to get it done? Because if you're not doing that, I just don't think you have a chance against Michigan State.
So top 2 issues, would you say 3-point shooting and transition defense?
Yeah, 3-point shooting is too simple to me. It's really the spacing of the offense when you're playing this way. I don't think Michigan had a lot of great 3-point looks because I don't think Michigan could space the floor properly to create those looks. So it was that lack of spacing more than – it's not like you just missed a bunch of threes, right? I don't – like Eli Brooks didn't get a lot of clean looks. I did think Michigan did a good job of, like, they ran some different stuff to try to create, like, it really had the feel of we're going to try to manufacture points however we can. And sometimes that worked, sometimes it didn't, but it just never felt sustainable, right? So you can steal a couple points here and there. I mean, Xavier Simpson basically willed Michigan through this game to the point where they were in striking distance at all, right? He had those, I think, 3 strips that led to 9 points, 7 points in the first half. Those are just effort plays that he figured out a way to make. But who else? You need someone else to be able to do something offensively, and they just didn't have that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll see the 6 for 18 number for Simpson, and think that maybe he had a bad game, but I thought that he was really the only thing Michigan had going for it. And it's one of those, like, someone's got to shoot the ball. And really, the options got worse as the day seemed to go on. Xavier tried to kind of take it upon himself. He basically needed to play a perfect game. I think we talked about it at the bar the night before, where you're like, every hook that he puts up, he has to make. And that's a huge ask. But, like, in terms of going into Breslin and getting a win, you needed a Xavier Simpson performance on the level of Cassius Winston yesterday, of this just dynamic showing.
Yeah, he needed to play a near perfect game, and Cassius Winston had to play a substandard game. Instead, Cassius Winston played the best game he's played.
Right.
So you're kind of drawing dead in that sense.
Do you have I mean, I know you said that you don't put too much stock into 3-point shooting, but does 11 for 60 on the road raise an eye, or do you think that's kind of just a thing that will regress to the mean?
The first thing is that Michigan State and Illinois in Big Ten games have had the two best defenses in the conference.
Mm-hmm.
Louisville is ranked 16th in adjusted defensive efficiency. So it's not like Michigan's gone on the road and played at Northwestern, Nebraska, someone like that. So it is it's going to be skewed in that sense because we've only played 3 really good teams on the road who are all competent defensively. It's not a good sign to shoot that poorly on the road. I don't know that we're at a point where you can say that those shots will never go in. You know what I mean? Like, what do you really make of it with that small of a sample size? It's tough to say.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see Michigan all of a sudden making a bunch of shots without Isaiah Livers on the court. So I think that's a bigger issue is how you build an offense without Isaiah Livers as long as he's out, because it's not like you're missing shots that you should have made. And I don't think it's not like you're just having a poor shooting game. It's that your offense is not generating good enough looks.
Mm-hmm. Good takeaways for Michigan yesterday. I liked the way they attacked the offensive glass. The fact that they were able to score in the paint. What were you going to say?
So they had 14 offensive rebounds, but they missed a lot of shots. They only rebounded 29% of their misses, for what it's worth, which is not. I mean, obviously
that's not nothing against Michigan State.
Sure, but the rebounding was equal. Both teams rebounded 29% of their misses.
Mm-hmm.
So just
trying to throw out some positives for the boys.
How concerned should people be about Michigan's defense?
I would have some legitimate concerns. It's
giving up 1.15 points per possession in Big Ten play, 3rd worst in the league.
I don't think Michigan's defense right now is that overly difficult to game plan against.
Meaning what?
I think you can find looks, pretty good looks. At any given time, outside of Simpson and Teskey, I think, and Brooks, pretty solid defensive player, but there's just a lot of things that seem that they can be exploited, and I don't know. It's weird. And see, yesterday is so hard to come off of and like answer a question like that because they tried so many different things and nothing worked. What was that matchup zone thing? That were they switching to man in the middle of it?
Certainly, what it looked like to me. It looked almost like a knockoff of Oregon's defense, yes, where all of a sudden there would be cutters and then they would follow cutters, and then I wasn't sure what they were playing. And it's really hard to tell from the baseline. It makes you appreciate reading the game when you're on the court because it's so much easier to appreciate what's happening when you have more of like a TV view or like you can see the whole court.
Yeah.
But I was not sure. They did it 4 or 5 times, I think. And I don't know if that's something to, I don't know. They've tried a lot of different things on defense this year already. Mm-hmm. And mostly for probably less than 10 possessions total, but nothing's really like stuck around as a main thing. So I don't know what to really make of that look. I'm going to have to go back and look at what on earth they were doing.
But like as long as Livers is out, you can basically just run 1-4 ball screens on Michigan until you're blue in the face.
That is a good point. Michigan was basically hedging. Michigan was defending 1-4 ball screens like 1-5 ball screens, which with Livers, they probably just switch that a lot of times.
Right.
So that's very good point. Does Michigan's defense improve to where did you say Michigan's defense ends up in the Big Ten? Like, is this the top half defense?
Yeah.
So you think there is improvement?
Where are they right now?
For them? They're 12th.
Holy shit!
Just through 3 games.
Sure.
Obviously, that impacts it, but that's the big thing I think to look at is how can they figure it out defensively? Because even with Isaiah Livers back, I think there's still some defensive issues you have to work through.
Well,
I don't think they've shown the same level of defensive discipline maybe that they saw last year. And there's not Charles Matthews. That's a big factor.
100%.
In terms of you don't have the Aaron Henry guy that can just lock down a wing, and that makes it much more difficult in the rigors of league play.
Well, the good news is Michigan plays Purdue on Thursday, which just scored 37 points in a basketball game last night. Then after that, it's at Minnesota, which is the number 9 offense in the Big Ten. Certainly capable, but not exactly daunting. So there's not, there's a chance to regain some confidence defensively.
Yes, I do think scoring against Purdue will be very hard, and I also think Purdue will be interesting to see if Juwan Howard changes his thinking at all as far as playing two bigs against a team that will gladly play two bigs if you allow them to. Where Purdue will just say, all right, we'll put Harms in there. We'll put, why am I blanking on his name?
Travion
Williams in there, and we'll play two bigs too. We are always scared to play two bigs because we can't defend when we play two big.
Right.
So that's something. I mean, I'm just because we know how John Beilein acted in those spots always. It was always to go smaller and spread the floor.
Yeah.
Be interesting to see if Michigan adjusts at all. And obviously, I'd say Livers could come back, and that isn't really a question.
So, kind of big picture on Michigan, between not having Franz early, now not having Isaiah, it seems to me, and this is probably also the product of having a first-year head coach who is certainly going through his own learning process of what adjustments do I make? What do I want the team to look like? When am I most comfortable? When am I least comfortable? All these things like that very fairly have to kind of play themselves out. Michigan, I feel like what Michigan has constantly been this odd moving target. And it goes from everything from rotation-wise, right? Sometimes there's three guards. Sometimes there's two bigs. And, whereas you kind of want to have confidence and consistency of what you are, Michigan seems to lack that on both sides of the floor. Some of it's out of its control, and some of it is, a byproduct of maybe not just kind of riding one thing and seeing where it takes you. What do you think about that?
I think it's pretty clear exactly what Michigan is. I just think there's no there's no margin for error. For Michigan to be at its best, you know exactly the 5 players that need to be on the court. You know exactly the offense you need to run. And if you don't have one of those 5 players, I don't think there's no replacement for Isaiah Livers for Michigan to be what Michigan is. So I don't think what Michigan is has changed. I think it's a spread ball screen team where you put Eli, you put Franz, and you put Isaiah around Simpson and Teskey, and that's it. I don't know anything that goes beyond that. Yeah, that's inconsistent. There's no one else you can really trust on the roster, I would think. As far as I'm going to ride with this guy for a month, for the whole season. Maybe guys will get there eventually. But the fact is that there's just not that sort of give. There's no other plan. And that's the same. That's always been the thing, right? If Xavier Simpson ball screens aren't working, I don't know what Michigan can do offensively.
I made the point to you in, I think, the middle of the game yesterday that Michigan's lack of depth in a game like yesterday and playing a team like Michigan State in an environment like Breslin probably had Juwan making some very serious recruiting calls late last night, would be my bet.
I think he probably would have done that even if he won.
That's a good point. That's fair. All right, so Thursday night, Michigan gets Purdue, and that game is on the road.
No,
No,
it's in Ann
home.
Arbor.
Sorry, home. And Michigan State has Minnesota at home. You on board with 2 W's there?
I think Michigan State over Minnesota is pretty easy prediction. Purdue is a scary team to play. They're flawed offensively, but you know they're going to have a good game plan on defense. You know Matt Painter has thought about guarding Michigan ball screens for years. He's been really frustrated by it. He's going to say, now we have a way that we can do it. He's going to know what he's doing, right? It's going to be hard for Michigan to score in that game. If Isaiah Livers is not playing, Purdue's not going to give up easy transition stuff. They're not going to have defensive breakdowns. You're going to have to make plays and score over them. Playing at home in a game you have to win, I mean, you like Michigan, but it's going to be a tough one, I think.
That sounds right to me. I do think. I
mean, to be fair, Purdue lost.
Yeah, Purdue's not that good, dude. I know
Purdue
that Ken
lost by 26 at Illinois, and they lost by 14 at Nebraska.
I'm trying to show due respect here, but they're not that good. And finally starting to drop in Ken Palm. They're down to 23, which is like unheard of for Purdue.
You generally look at games against teams that aren't that good as the scary ones, though.
That's
right?
fair.
You got to beat the team. They're a game you have to win. Like Sunday at Michigan State, that's not a game you have to win.
Yes.
In the big picture of what you want to be at the end of the year. So I think it's a scary spot for Michigan. They'll feel that
Got to
pressure.
win it.
Yeah.
You got to win this game. You have 2 road games on the back end. At Minnesota, at Iowa, definitely both losable games. You've already lost 4 of your last 7. You lose this game, you do, it's January, so you have to kind of temper what you say, but you do kind of start to enter this could go sideways here pretty easily. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think in most of the Big Ten season, you look at the week ahead and you're like, man, better go 1-1 this week or shit could go sideways. I don't think true. Michigan's really unique in that spot. There's no easy games. Michigan's easiest games are Nebraska at home, the second to last game of the season. So
yeah, so Michigan has 1, 2, 3, 4. They have 5 games before the Nebraska Rutgers back-to-back. And the back-to-back after that is Ohio State, Michigan State. But this 5 game, I think you just need to get through this at 2-2 or 3-1, and get to that Nebraska Rutgers back-to-back, and maybe you can actually string together some wins. How's that sound to you?
I feel like you're missing a game in there, but it's all right.
Where?
It's going 2-2 in a 5-game stretch.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go.
You want to win 2 or 3 games, I think, in this next stretch, right? Is that what you're trying to say?
3-2, 2-3. Yeah, right.
You have to win the home games, basically. Purdue, Penn State, Illinois at home. Win those, and you're fine. If you win the home games, you'll always be treading water and in a good spot, I would say. That's kind of once you start losing home games, you have to make up ground. You have to go on the road. You have to steal games, and that's where it gets uncomfortable.
Right. Agreed. Okay. You got anything else? Keep this to a nice, tidy hour?
No, I didn't. I think that's it.
Okay.
I don't have anything to add.
No. All right. Well, that'll do it for this week. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast. If you would be so kind, please leave us a review in the iTunes store. That apparently helps us find new listeners. Subscribe to The Athletic. Subscribe to UM Hoops. And be sure to tip your bartenders and servers.